You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again after the money's gone. Once in a lifetime.
Hello, happy Easter, and welcome to episode number 20 of the For All That podcast. This week we are joined by a couple of guests. Our first is Douglas McLellan, who is possibly the newest and the most right-wing member of the Green Party in Scotland, and one of the many lapsed Liberals that one finds, littering the landscape. How are you getting on, Douglas?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. And on the still Liberal camp, we're also joined by Caron Lindsay, who is a co-editor of Liberal Democrat Voice and a Scottish Lib Dem activist who many of you may have read in the past. Thank you for coming on, Caron.
Thanks very much. Looking forward to it.
And as ever, the fourth man in the room is Michael Greenwell, who joins us having played midwife to a range of kittens, I believe. Michael, are you looking bleary and feeling very broody?
Well, it was in the middle of the night, and I was kind of alternately tweeting about that and North Korea, which makes for a strange mix. But I did take some photos, but I thought I should do. There's too many cat photos on the internet, so I thought let's go disgusting with this. I've got photo of eating the placenta or the other stuff. Nobody ever puts those kitten photos up. But no, I think I'll hold off on that one.
That sounds absolutely delicious. And on that placenta consumption theme, or perhaps not, we can move on to our first sort of story of the week. And this is from you, Caron. There's been a range of speeches being made recently by a number of politicians, including your dear leader, Nick Clegg, on the topic of immigration. And it's a persistent topic, I think, in British public discourse, which pretends that we're not allowed to discuss it, and that it's somehow a kind of third rail of politics. Do you want to tell us about what caught your eye in terms of maybe Nick Clegg's speech or just on the issue in general?
Well, I think there were some good things about Nick Clegg's speech as opposed to when David Cameron spoke about it. It was a bit like good cop, bad cop between the two of them. Nick certainly tried to smash the Daily Mail kind of myths that you get about immigration. But I think it was a lost opportunity, really, to tackle the problems that really do exist within the system. I spent 4 years working as a caseworker, and some of the ways that the UK border agency, which is now not very lamented, has now been broken into two. Some of the ways that people were treated were absolutely appalling. And what we actually need is a fair immigration system where it makes the right decisions and treats people like human beings. And we don't have that at the moment. And nobody is talking about how we deliver that. I was particularly vexed by an idea that Nick Clegg had in his speech that if people couldn't learn English, there was a possibility of charging for translation services, which I've spoken English all my life, and I find the immigration system really quite complex, and I would not expect anybody who did not speak English as their first language to go through it without the services of an interpreter or a translator. But what worries me as well is that people are justifying the changes that the coalition has made to bringing spouses in. You have to earn really quite a lot of money before you can bring your spouse in, particularly if you have children. I have a friend who lives in Japan with her husband. She has 2 young children. She's given up work to look after them. And if they wanted to come and live in this country, it would be virtually impossible for them to do so.
Douglas, you, I know, have a personal experience of this. You are going through the grind and horror of the kind of immigration process. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, my wife is a Zimbabwean national. She's lived in this country for the best part of 10 years on various different temporary visas, student and things like that, going through a whole range of qualifications, and just recently managed to qualify through her own self-funding as a ACCA chartered certified accountant. So what I really find confusing is the difficulty that she has with her intelligence and her skills and her background in accessing the immigration system. We went together to the UK Border Agency office in Glasgow, which is a very aggressive approach that the door staff take. She actually made sure she didn't actually have anything in her handbag because she was quite sure she wouldn't see some of it again based on some of her previous experiences. On a wider point, and as Caron was saying, there's a missed opportunity here. We as a country need immigration. There is no doubt about that. To shy away from it, to pick up bits and pieces that are really on the periphery of the overall conversation about who can speak what language, who's coming from where, and why, when actually you need to think about it from a UK perspective in terms of things like, well, actually, what's our population demographics going to be like? How many people are actually going to be around in this country to pay the taxes that we're going to need to actually for the care of the older people, even if they do sell all the houses, who are they going to sell the houses to? In terms of people working, living in this country. And then you look at where Britain is in terms of a global economy. We do need intelligent people to come here. We do need a broad workforce. And then you look at the immigration decisions that we made where we start blocking off both people and money from places like India, people and money from places like Brazil. These countries are looking at Britain and going, well, actually, we won't bother with them. We won't bother going to get educated there, and we won't bother doing business there. So it actually causes a much bigger, more profound problem about the size, shape, and nature of Britain and its economy.
I think that's an interesting point, that, because I, in Oxford, know quite a lot of North Americans, quite a lot of people who aren't from these islands who are here to study, and they have had terrible experiences, very much along the line that you were describing there, Douglas, with the border agencies in terms of dealing with the authorities, who are often cold, distant, and rather unpleasant in the course of their deliberations with them. But it's a point that one of my Canadian friends makes, that if an independent Scotland wishes to prosper from all of these smart people, then they can take a different tag from the UK, which has made it very difficult for even very well qualified, smart, diligent, industrious characters to really get into this country and to stay here. And I think the point you made there, Caron, about the spouses seems particularly worrying in terms of, if you are a citizen of a country and you happen to get into a romantic, committed relationship with somebody else, and then you can't practically return to that country in order to live out your life. That seems sort of almost not a deprivation of citizenship, but a deprivation of the practical effectiveness of what the rights of a citizen ought to be. Michael, I don't know if you want to have any thoughts on that particular issue there.
Yeah, I agree with what Douglas said. We do need a lot of immigration, although the population of Britain is actually increasing. Although, contrary to popular belief, this is not actually a result of immigration. There's more people leaving than there are coming in at the moment. But if you look at the actual statistics at the moment, there's something of a baby boom going on. But at the same time, there's more people leaving than there are coming in. But I think in general, the whole debate about immigration in Britain is so poisoned, partly from the kind of the Daily Mail and the Daily Express and this kind of thing, but also the politicians themselves who use it as an easy target. Okay, I want to grab a headline, I better bash immigrants. The whole debate becomes poisoned, and that's why we lead to some of the things that are actually shameful. I mean, what Douglas is explaining about problems with his wife is one thing, and it's not nice at all. But then think about things like Dungavel and the holding centres that you find in Britain. It's actually disgraceful that people getting removed from their beds forcibly in the middle of the night. These things are not a mark of a decent society at all.
Caron, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, just to say really that independence is not going to be the panacea that makes everything, makes every public service treat people properly. There are as many local authorities and Scottish government organisations that, people don't feel that they're satisfied in their dealings with. Certainly, I think it's just as possible to develop a decent immigration policy on a UK level. And actually, if you want to deal with people's fears about housing and things like that, what you actually need to do is just provide more affordable housing for everybody and not set people against each other.
I should say that my reference to independence there was a joke made by a friend of mine, and absolutely, it was a point at the rather high level of policy rather than the experience of people on the street. There was an interesting thing you sent me earlier, Caron, about the treatment of pregnant women in the system. and the experiences of, I think it was asylum seekers primarily on this topic, which is much more along the kind of outrageous lines that Michael was describing there, involving people who are, sort of walking home all alone. Do you want to maybe just talk briefly to that?
That was appalling, actually. Sarah Tether, who's a Liberal Democrat MP, has done lots of work on immigration, and she was at this launch of a report which described a situation where an asylum seeker who had just given birth, was not given any money or anything to get a pushchair or anything, had to walk home with her baby in the snow. I mean, that is just absolutely appalling. And then you have David Cameron standing up and saying, oh, we need to restrict people's access to the health service. No, we don't. We need to treat people compassionately. But, I mean, talking about what you said about Dungavel, yes. I think we need to remember as well that it's the Liberal Democrats who made sure that no children are now detained at Dungavel.
Douglas, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Caron. There was one of the consequences of the Lib Dems in the UK government has been a change to how immigration situations where the children involved have been addressed. I think in terms of broader immigration, the idea of regional immigration has been talked about previously, and politicians in Scotland have highlighted the need for immigration into Scotland, and it could be good for Scotland in terms of meeting various needs. And I think that is something that a Scottish after independence, or even a devolution level after the referendum, needs to be considered about how it could be done, which of course would be quite difficult. But it would be good to move the immigration debate into not anti-immigration, but more what are the needs and the restrictions and the hopes and aspirations of Britain and the immigrants who come here.
And is there an interesting point about this, which is struck me about the EU angle on all of this, because in some ways, because of the sort of common market, we don't think about people coming from France or Germany as immigration on a large scale. But when someone in Eastern Europe joins the EU and gains rights to access the British economy, then it produces this kind of great outpouring of, to my mind, quite ethnically stereotyped and very unattractive responses about Bulgarians and you name it.
Wasn't there an article about someone suggested that more Bulgarians were coming than actually there are Bulgarians? I'm sure someone came out with something.
I actually wrote something like that because UKIP had, during the Eastleigh by-election, UKIP were putting stuff around saying that 4 million Bulgarians were suddenly going to arrive in people's back gardens on the 1st of January next year. Or 40 million, sorry. And that's actually more than the populations of Romania and Bulgaria put together. But the one thing I want to say is that I think that the Liberal Democrats, Scottish Liberal Democrats, actually missed an opportunity in their Home Rule Commission to actually address the issue of immigration. That's the one thing in a very good report that talked about devolution from Holyrood as much as to it. Actually, we should have had a distinctive line on immigration, because I do think Scotland has a particular needs in that area.
Okay, well, maybe that's a nice point to move on, and I can maybe ask Douglas a question to lead us into this, because at the head of the show, I announced you as the newest and most right-wing member of the Green Party, which is your own definition, I should say, not mine. Given that we're all familiar with the politics around the Liberals at the moment and the awkwardness, I mean, what prompted you to leave the party, and what prompted you, for that matter, to join up with the Greens? You're not necessarily the obvious kind of fellow traveller I would have down to be joining Patrick Harvey at the barricades. Do you want to tell us a wee bit about that?
Well, my Lib Dem membership had lapsed for a wee while, and I've never ever though been involved in the tribalism of politics. To me, every political party has a manifesto that's worth reading. You can reject 100% of it if it happens to be too extreme, but every party has ideas that are worth looking at, and it's not to be immediately rejected because it came from that party. It's all about the strength of the evidence and the strength of the policy. When I was looking around, I do have an interest in politics. The things around, going back further, the unfortunate loss of the AV referendum, the lack of reform in the House of Lords, how we elect our representatives looked like it was going to take some time now to address. So that's really why I looked and said, right, well, I think a shortcut could actually be an independent Scotland. So then I started looking about how do I look at to engage that with local politics. Am I just going to be involved in some Yes Scotland campaign work and stuff like that? Then things happened around secret courts, which I know has probably rocked Caron to her core and will feel a lot more pain about it than I do. And then you look at some of the things that might be coming out of Westminster soon, such as the communications bill and things like that, and you just realise that, unfortunately, what's